I could feel the tension in the air before the words even left her mouth. My sister, Madison, was standing in front of the door, holding a set of keys. She didn't look at me as she turned the lock, but I could feel her anger radiating from her like an electric current. "You're really that selfish, aren't you?" she scoffed. I stayed silent, not because I didn't have a response, but because I didn't think it would matter. There was no point arguing anymore. What's done is done. We had spent the past few weeks planning for this Thanksgiving, just like we always did. It was the one time of year when our house became the gathering point for the whole family. For years, it was a sacred tradition. Our parents, Greg and Laura, took pride in hosting. Every year, they cooked, cleaned, and decorated, turning our house into a holiday spectacle. It wasn't just about food or presents. It was about family. At least, that's how I used to see it. As a kid, I loved the chaos of Thanksgiving. The smells of turkey and stuffing, the chatter of distant relatives, and the warmth of everyone crowding into our house. Even as I got older, there was something comforting about the tradition. But over the past few years, something had changed. The joy had slowly eroded, replaced by exhaustion and resentment. Last year, I saw it firsthand. My parents spent days preparing, cooking for more than 30 people, organizing the house, making sure every detail was perfect. But when everyone finally arrived, instead of gratitude, there were complaints. The food wasn't as good as it used to be. The house was too hot. Greg didn't have the wine he specifically wanted. It seemed like no matter what they did, nothing was ever enough. By the time the last guest had left, my parents were barely standing. I could see it in their faces, the exhaustion, the frustration. My mom had collapsed onto the couch, her eyes filled with a mix of defeat and regret. I overheard them talking in the kitchen long after the dishes had been cleared. "We can't do this again," my mom whispered. I remember her voice quivering, like she was on the verge of tears. My dad had sighed deeply. "We've been doing this for years, but for who?" "Everyone else. When was the last time we did something for ourselves?" I stood frozen in the hallway, hearing those words. It was the first time I realized they were both done. For years, they had given everything to the family, every ounce of their time, energy, and patience. But it had become too much. They needed a break. And that was when they made the decision that would change everything. The next morning, my mom was scrolling through vacation deals on her phone, her coffee forgotten on the table. Greg was sitting at his desk, looking up flights. Before either of us could process what was happening, they told us. "This year, we're not hosting Thanksgiving," my dad said, his voice calm but resolute. Madison's reaction was instant. "What? You can't be serious," she said, almost knocking her mug over. "You can't just cancel Thanksgiving. It's a tradition." Her eyes were wide with disbelief, her face flushed with anger. I wanted to say something, to back her up, but I stayed silent. It wasn't that I didn't understand the importance of Thanksgiving to her. I did. But I also understood the toll it had taken on our parents. "Madison, it's not just one day," my mom explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's days of cooking, cleaning, making sure everyone is happy. We're exhausted. We need a break." Her words were firm, but I could see the vulnerability behind them. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about their well-being, something none of us had fully understood until that moment. Madison's face twisted into something I had never seen before. "You're being selfish," she snapped, her voice sharp. "The family is depending on you. You can't just turn your back on us." "We're not turning our back on anyone," my dad said, his voice unwavering. "We've done our part. Now it's time to take care of ourselves." That was the beginning of the storm. We all knew it was coming. The family wouldn't take this well. Madison wasn't the only one upset. Aunt Sarah sent a message in the group chat, expressing her disappointment. "This isn't what family does," she wrote. "We come together, no matter what. Thanksgiving is about tradition, not vacations." Cousin Mark chimed in, "I can't believe you're letting this tradition slip away." I could hear the judgment in their words, even though they tried to disguise it as concern. But there were a few who understood. Uncle Dave, usually the quiet one, sent a message saying, "If you need a break, take it. Someone else will host." But Madison wasn't ready to give up. She spent the next few days trying to convince us, sending passive-aggressive messages in the group chat, trying to guilt-trip our parents into changing their minds. But nothing worked. That's when the first sign of trouble came. Mom put down her phone one afternoon, her face drained of color. "What's wrong?" I asked, instantly feeling a knot form in my stomach. She didn't answer immediately, just stared at the screen, as if the words on it didn't make sense. "Are you okay?" my dad asked, his voice softening as he stepped closer. "I don't know," my mom murmured, scrolling through the messages. I leaned in, trying to see what was so troubling. And that's when I saw it. A message from Aunt Sarah, confirming her attendance for Thanksgiving. "I can't wait to be at your house again this year," she wrote. "See you all soon." The message was innocent enough, but there was just one problem. My parents had never sent out any invitations. "Do they mean us?" my dad asked, clearly confused. "That's Madison," I said, my anger rising. I didn't even need to look up from the screen. I knew it had to be her. Mom immediately called Madison. The conversation that followed was brief, but devastating. "What's going on, Madison?" my mom asked. "We're getting messages from the family, thanking us for the invitation." "What did you do?" Madison's response was casual, almost too casual. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Mom. I just told them it was still on. You know, Thanksgiving. Everyone wants to be together. I figured we'd work things out later." I could hear my dad's breathing get heavier as Madison continued. "You told everyone?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. "You've organized a dinner behind our backs?" Madison laughed, but it wasn't a joyful sound. It was cold and calculating. "I knew you'd come around. The family expects this. I'm just making sure everything goes smoothly." I could feel my heart racing. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was a betrayal. I don't think anyone in the room knew how to process what Madison had just said. Her voice echoed in the silence, and I could see the confusion and anger spreading across both of our parents' faces. It wasn't the kind of mistake that could be easily swept under the rug. She had gone behind our backs, made decisions without even considering the impact on us, and now the family was expecting Thanksgiving to happen, whether we were ready or not. "Madison," my dad's voice trembled with disbelief, "you can't just make decisions like this without talking to us first. This isn't your holiday to control. This is our decision, and it's final." But she wasn't hearing it. "You don't get it," she snapped, her face hardening. "This isn't just about you. This is about the family. You're making a selfish decision, and you're ruining it for everyone." I felt my anger building, my mind racing. I wanted to tell her how wrong she was, how she was the one being selfish, but my voice caught in my throat. I had no idea how to navigate this kind of conflict, no idea how to explain to her that our parents deserved peace, that they had given everything to make everyone else happy, and now it was time to focus on themselves. But before I could respond, Madison hung up the phone. Her actions were swift, decisive, and felt like a slap in the face. I stood there, stunned, as the room seemed to close in around me. I couldn't even look at her. What she had done wasn't just about breaking a family tradition, it was about breaking trust. And once that's gone, it's hard to rebuild. My dad ran a hand over his face in frustration, and my mom, who had been so calm just a moment ago, now seemed visibly shaken. She stared at the floor, lost in thought, probably trying to figure out what to do next. I had no words of comfort to offer, no solutions. It was clear now that this Thanksgiving would not be like the ones before. The rest of the evening felt like a blur. Mom stayed quiet, retreating into herself, while Dad took a long walk outside, trying to clear his head. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the half-finished dishes on the counter, wondering how everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. But as the hours passed, I realized something. We weren't just fighting over Thanksgiving. We were fighting over something much deeper. Our family dynamic had shifted, and what seemed like a small disagreement about dinner was really a reflection of the cracks that had been forming for years. The truth was, none of us had truly dealt with the tension that had been building between us. Madison had always been the rebellious one, the one who pushed boundaries and refused to follow the rules. But this was different. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. Later that night, my dad came back inside, his face red from the cold. He walked into the kitchen, where I was sitting, and for a moment, he just stared at me, lost in thought. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice softer now. "But it's going to take more than just a family meeting to fix this." I nodded, but I wasn't sure what he meant. How could we fix something that felt so broken? The next few days were a blur of messages, calls, and a growing sense of dread. The family, as expected, wasn't happy with our parents' decision to cancel Thanksgiving, but Madison wasn't helping matters. She continued to send group messages, emphasizing how selfish our parents were being, how the family needed to come together, and how she would take charge if they wouldn't. "I'll handle it. I'll cook the dinner, I'll clean, I'll set up," she texted, as if we were just supposed to fall in line with her plans. I could feel the tension mounting in every word. It wasn't just about the dinner anymore, it was about control. But I was done. I had seen enough. I couldn't stand by and let her dictate everything. "You can't just do this," I texted back. "This isn't how it works. We need to respect Mom and Dad's wishes. It's their decision, not yours." Her reply came almost instantly, "You're just as bad as them. You're all turning your back on family. I'm not going to sit by while you ruin this for everyone. You'll see. I'll make it happen anyway. Without you." I stared at her words, a mix of anger and disbelief swelling in my chest. What had happened to the sister I once knew? The one who used to understand, the one who used to care? It felt like I was losing her to something that was bigger than any of us. The following afternoon, things reached a boiling point. I walked into the living room to find Madison standing in front of our parents, holding up her phone. Her face was flushed, her fists clenched. The look in her eyes made it clear that she was beyond reasoning. "I'm done talking," she spat. "You all want to cancel Thanksgiving? Fine. But I'm doing it anyway. The family deserves better than this." My dad stood up, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and disappointment. "Madison, this isn't about the family. This is about what your mother and I need. We've been doing this for years, and we're exhausted. We're not going to continue living for everyone else." "Then you're not family," Madison shouted. "Family comes first. You're making a huge mistake." Her words hung in the air, thick and heavy. I didn't know what to say. In a way, I understood her frustration. But in another way, I was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of this constant back and forth. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving. This was about her refusal to understand that sometimes, even family needs a break. I walked out of the room, unable to be around her anymore. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew that something had to give. The days following the argument felt like they were stretching on forever. Every time I walked into the house, there was an underlying tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Madison had disappeared for a while, and I wasn't sure whether to be relieved or terrified. It was hard to imagine what was going through her head, especially after the explosion in the living room. Our family was teetering on the edge, and none of us knew how to stop the fall. My parents were still trying to act normal, but the cracks were visible. My dad, usually a rock of calm in times like these, had been quiet, withdrawn, and at times, restless. I could see the way he fidgeted, avoiding eye contact. Mom had retreated into her baking, as though somehow kneading dough would help her process the chaos around us. But her smile, once warm and comforting, felt forced. I knew they were still hurt, still reeling from what had been said, but I also knew they would never admit it. I wasn't sure if I should try to confront them or let them process it in their own way. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid that any wrong move would make things worse. Then, the phone call came. It was late one evening, and I had just finished helping Mom with the dishes. I had the sudden urge to get some air, to clear my head, so I walked out onto the porch, staring out at the distant lights of the city. The ring of the phone pierced the silence, and I glanced at the screen. It was Madison. My heart dropped. What could she possibly want now? I hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. Hello? My voice came out shaky, betraying my unease. Don't hang up, Madison's voice cracked on the other end. She sounded different, almost fragile. Please, just let me explain. I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of frustration and curiosity. What's there to explain, Madison? You've made it clear how you feel. You don't care about what Mom and Dad want, and you certainly don't care about what the rest of us want. Please, just listen, she pleaded, her tone quieter now, more subdued. I've been thinking a lot about what I said. About how I reacted. I was angry, and I was hurt. I thought I was helping, that I could fix everything. But I was wrong. Her words took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting an apology, certainly not one that sounded so genuine. I stayed silent for a moment, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. I know it doesn't make sense, she continued, but I was scared. Scared that we were all going to lose something important. I thought if I could force everyone to come together, to keep things as they were, then everything would be okay. But now I realize I was only making things worse. And I don't know how to fix it. Her confession caught me off guard, and I found myself struggling to find the right words. Was she really sorry? Was this just another manipulation? I didn't know. But the sincerity in her voice made me think twice. I don't know, Madison. You can't just walk in and fix everything. It's not that simple. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to steady my thoughts. You need to talk to Mom and Dad. They're hurt, too. They're not the bad guys here. I will, she said quietly. I'm just asking for a chance to try. Please. Can you tell them that? I know I messed up, but I don't want to lose them. I don't want to lose any of you. For a moment, I was silent, trying to figure out whether I should trust her. There had been so many times before when she had promised things would be different, only to let us down. But this time felt different. Maybe it was the vulnerability in her voice, or maybe it was the desperation that made me want to believe her. I'll tell them, I finally said, my voice soft. But you have to be honest with them, Madison. No more hiding behind excuses. No more making decisions without asking for input. If you really want to fix this, you have to start by acknowledging what you did wrong. I will. I promise, she said, her voice full of determination. Thank you for giving me a chance. I won't mess this up. I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of relief and doubt. Was this really the beginning of a change, or just another cycle in the family drama? I didn't know. But I had to try. We all had to try. The next few days were filled with a tense kind of waiting. Madison had promised to talk to Mom and Dad, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were far from over. She had a tendency to start things and then disappear, leaving the rest of us to clean up the mess. This time, though, there was something in her tone that made me believe she might be sincere. Still, I had to be cautious. I wasn't the only one who felt unsure. Mom and Dad were wary, too. Every time they discussed Madison's actions, there was a lingering sadness in their voices. It wasn't just the holiday that had been ruined, it was the feeling that they had lost something else. Something far more important than a dinner. And then, on the evening of what was supposed to be our first Thanksgiving without the usual family chaos, Madison returned. She showed up at the door, unannounced, holding a large bag of groceries. She looked older, different somehow. The usual defiance in her posture had softened, replaced by something quieter, more subdued. She stepped into the house, and for a moment, it felt like everything stopped. There was no yelling, no blame. Just a heavy silence that hung in the air. "I'm here to help," she said, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "I know I can't change what happened, but I want to make things right. Let me cook. Let me clean. Let me fix this." Mom and Dad exchanged a look, one I couldn't read, before my mom nodded. "All right," she said softly. "We'll do this together. But we're all going to have to talk, Madison. No more pretending." I glanced at Madison, still unsure of what was happening. But for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could heal. Maybe this wasn't the end of our family, it was just the beginning of a new chapter. The following weeks felt like a careful reconstruction of something fragile, something that had been shattered beyond recognition. Madison's return had been a small spark of hope, but the road to recovery was not as simple as just cooking together or cleaning up the mess she had left behind. It was about understanding, about confronting the issues we had all been avoiding for far too long. As the days passed, Madison began to make an effort. She started showing up for family dinners, even though it was awkward at first. There were long silences, and it felt like no one quite knew how to act. But, at least, she was there, physically present in a way she hadn't been in years. It was as if she was trying to prove that she could be trusted again, that she could be part of this family, no matter how broken we all felt. Mom and Dad were hesitant, but they were trying. Dad had taken to calling family meetings at the dinner table, where we would sit together, like old times, and talk about whatever was on our minds. These were tense discussions, and they usually began with awkward small talk before everything came tumbling out. And with every conversation, Madison would slowly open up a little more, revealing bits and pieces of her pain that had led to the anger and bitterness. It wasn't easy to listen to, but it was necessary. "I thought I was doing what was best for all of us," she confessed one evening, her eyes welling up with tears. "But all I did was push everyone away. I was angry at myself. I didn't know how to fix what was broken, so I tried to control everything. And I hurt all of you in the process." Her vulnerability was startling. I hadn't seen this side of her before. It was easy to blame her for everything that went wrong, to chalk up her actions to selfishness and immaturity. But hearing her speak like this, raw and unguarded, I started to realize that there was more to her story. More to why she had become the way she was. For the first time in a long time, I found myself questioning my own feelings toward her. I had spent so much time resenting her, so much energy hating what she had done to our family, that I had forgotten that she, too, was human, flawed, imperfect, and struggling with her own demons. Dad, who had been quiet throughout most of these conversations, finally spoke up one evening. "We've all made mistakes. Not just you, Madison. We all have. We've let things fester, held onto grudges, instead of talking to each other. We're not perfect. But we can try to be better. Together." There was something in his voice that made me believe him. I had always thought my father was the one who had everything figured out, the one who knew how to keep his family together. But now I saw that he, too, was learning, evolving, just like the rest of us. Mom, too, softened. She had always been the nurturer, the one who kept the peace, but she, too, had her limits. For years, she had been silent, watching Madison push us away without saying a word. But now, she spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "Madison, I know you think that pushing us away was the answer. But it wasn't. We are a family, and that means we're in this together. You don't have to carry this burden alone." It was hard for me to believe at first, but seeing them both, Mom and Dad, showing this much compassion and understanding, it made me start to hope that maybe, just maybe, we could fix things. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But the wounds weren't as deep as I had thought. There was still something worth saving in all of us. The breakthrough came when Madison and I went for a walk together one evening. It had been months since we'd had a real conversation, and I wasn't sure if we even knew how to talk to each other anymore. But as we strolled through the park, the weight of the past few months heavy between us, she stopped and turned to me. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," she began, her voice small. "I know it's going to take time. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I don't know how to make up for everything, but I'm willing to try. I want to be better. For you. For Mom. For Dad. I stopped walking, staring at her, trying to process what she was saying. For so long, I had wanted to hear those words from her. I had wanted to know that she saw the hurt she caused and was willing to take responsibility for it. But even now, as she spoke them, I wasn't sure if I could believe it. I don't know if I can just forgive you like that, I said, my voice tight. It's going to take time. A lot of time. You hurt all of us, Madison. And it's not going to go away with just a few words. She nodded, accepting it without protest. I get it. I just wanted you to know that I'm here, and I'm trying. I'll be patient. I'm not going anywhere. Her words were simple, but they were enough. Enough to make me feel that glimmer of hope again. Maybe we could heal. Maybe we could rebuild what had been broken. The healing process wasn't easy. There were days when things felt like they were moving forward, and then there were days when everything seemed to fall apart again. There were moments when Madison's old habits crept back in, and we would fall into the same patterns of miscommunication and frustration. But we kept trying. Slowly but surely, we started making progress. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of tension, of old wounds reopening. But the difference now was that we were finally talking, really talking, about the things that mattered. And that made all the difference. One evening, several months later, our family gathered together for another dinner. It wasn't a special occasion, and there was no reason to celebrate, other than the fact that we were all there. Madison had cooked the meal, and there was laughter around the table, a warmth that hadn't been there for a long time. As we sat there, passing the dishes around, I looked at Madison, at Mom, at Dad. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. I don't know where we're headed, I said quietly, my voice breaking the conversation. But I think we'll be okay. I think we'll be all right, as long as we keep trying. Madison looked at me, her eyes soft, and nodded. We'll be all right, she agreed. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. As the months passed, life gradually found a new rhythm. We were no longer the fractured family that had struggled to hold itself together in the face of betrayal and resentment. Things had shifted, slowly, but undeniably. We were starting to rediscover the meaning of togetherness, of healing. There were still moments when the scars of the past threatened to resurface, but the work we had put into rebuilding our relationship began to show. Our family dinners, once filled with awkward silences and tension, now carried an air of normalcy, even laughter. It felt different this time, genuine, not forced. Madison had taken it upon herself to prove that she was serious about being part of this family again. She had started seeking therapy, not just to deal with the issues she had been avoiding, but to also understand how she had hurt us, and why she had distanced herself for so long. It wasn't easy for her, she didn't open up to others easily, especially when it came to facing the darker parts of herself. But she was trying, and I admired that effort. It wasn't just Madison who was changing. I was, too. I had spent so much time being angry at her, at myself, for allowing the rift to grow so deep. But as the weeks passed, I realized that I, too, had to take responsibility. I had to let go of the resentment that had held me hostage for so long. It wasn't enough to simply say the words, I had to genuinely forgive her. It wasn't easy, but with time, I was beginning to. I had always thought that forgiveness meant forgetting. But I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, it was about accepting it, understanding it, and letting go of the bitterness that came with it. One of the most significant moments of our recovery came unexpectedly. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Madison asked if we could all go for a family hike. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a simple walk through the woods. But the invitation itself felt like a milestone. A year ago, Madison wouldn't have asked, wouldn't have considered it. She would have stayed locked in her own world, too consumed by her guilt and pain to even think about reconnecting with us. But now, things were different. We all agreed, and before long, we found ourselves walking along a trail, the cool breeze of spring rustling through the trees. The landscape was quiet and serene, but the air between us was anything but. It felt like we were walking through history, our shared history, step by step, trying to find the path to the future. I don't know how we got here, Madison said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost as if she were speaking to herself. But I'm glad we did. I'm grateful that you guys haven't given up on me. Mom smiled, her hand resting gently on Madison's shoulder. We never gave up on you. It was always about waiting for you to come back to us when you were ready. Dad, always the quiet one, spoke up then. Family's not perfect. It's messy. It's complicated. But that's what makes it worth fighting for. We've all made mistakes, but we're still here. We're still together. I glanced around at the three of them, at my family, and felt a warmth in my chest. There was still so much work to do, so many things that still needed to be said, but in that moment, I knew that we could do it. We were doing it. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking together, the conversation flowing easily. It was as though all the things we had left unsaid for so long were being said now, not with grand gestures or emotional confrontations, but with simple, everyday moments that mattered. There were no perfect answers, no quick fixes, but there was something undeniably beautiful in the effort. By the time we reached the end of the trail, we were all laughing, tired but content. The sun had begun to set, casting a golden glow over the horizon, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was going to be okay. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I realized that the true beauty of our recovery wasn't in the grand moments of reconciliation, but in the quiet, ordinary moments. The dinners where we laughed at old jokes. The mornings where we worked together to clean the house. The small conversations where we could ask how each other's day went without hesitation. It wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about acknowledging it and choosing to move forward together. That's when I truly understood what forgiveness meant. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It wasn't a single moment, a dramatic turning point. It was a process, a journey we were all on together. It was the decision, every day, to keep trying, to keep showing up, and to keep loving each other, even when it was hard. Madison had come a long way since she had first returned. So had I. So had Mom and Dad. We were no longer the same people we had been when everything fell apart. We had been tested, and we had survived. But more than that, we had grown. We had learned to love and forgive, not just with our words, but with our actions. We had learned that sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to let go of the past and trust that the future will be worth it. There would still be challenges ahead. We weren't magically fixed, and the scars of the past would never fully disappear. But for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could handle whatever came our way. Because we weren't doing it alone. We were doing it together.